Today, there's so much in our lives that influences us, our environment, the people around us. Sometimes we don't even know what's influencing us, and that's what we're here to talk about. Welcome to the Influence Today podcast with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles.
Hey, welcome to another episode of Influence Today with Chet Tart and Terry Lyles, and it's a unique way of looking at it. We normally broadcast from Venture X, and now we're broadcasting from our homes with Zoom. Hey, Terry, welcome.
Thank you, Chet. Good to be here again.
I can see you, but not close.
Yeah,
you're more than 6 feet away.
Exactly. Yeah, it's good.
Well, welcome, and you have a guest with us today, as you can see.
I do. Yeah, I'm so glad to introduce Tim Cindric. I'm going to go through his bio real quick. He is the president of Team Penske, and Tim joined the organization in 1999, became president of Team Penske. Overall management responsibility, I mean, he pretty much does it all there. I've seen him. Team Penske Racing, the operation including teams currently competing in the Monster Energy NASCAR Series, the NASCAR Xfinity Series, which his son races in Austin, the NTT IndyCar Series, the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship, and the Virgin Australia Sports Car Championship. So in addition to Tim also overseeing Penske Technology Group, Penske Restoration, Penske Heritage Center, and the Penske Racing Museum. Tim's career at Team Penske consists of more than 300 victories and 19 championships. That includes 8 Indianapolis 500 wins, 2 Daytona 500 wins, and overall win at the 12 Hours of Sebring. He also serves as a race strategist for the number 2 Team Penske Chevrolet, driven by Joseph Newgarden, and that is in IndyCar. The reigning 2019 IndyCar Champion Series, the number 7 Acura Team Penske IMSA DPI entry, driven by Elio Castroneves and Ricky Taylor. Prior to joining Team Penske, Tim served as the team manager of Team Rahal from 1994 to 1999. He's worked as an intern general manager and design engineer at True Sports and IndyCar team after graduating from Rolls-Holman Institute of Technology with a bachelor's degree in science and mechanical engineering in 1990. He's a member of the Hall of Fame at Rolls-Holman Pike High School. I'm going to add he was also a basketball superstar. He received Rolls-Holman's Honor Alumni Award in 2013. Tim has also been honored as the Herb Porter and Tom Carnegie Memorial Awards by the Indianapolis 500 Old Timers Club. We'll talk about that in a little bit. He resides in Mooresville, North Carolina, which is kind of the home to NASCAR and everything racing. With his wife, Megan, he has 2 sons, Tanner and Austin. And as I said, Austin races in the Xfinity Series. So, Tim, it's great to be here. It's just such an honor to read your resume because I know you up close and personal, and really glad to have you here today.
I appreciate you having me, Terry. And lots of things keep me busy around here.
I'm sure. And we wanted to jump right in because I know, and this is what started this conversation. Chet and I had this conversation a week ago, and we were talking about companies that are being innovative and those that are trying to figure out how to innovate and navigate through this. And I told him the story. I said, look, racing got it right. I mean, you guys haven't really missed a beat. I mean, you started the iRacing piece. Viewers are checking in. They're watching their favorite drivers. Sponsors are still getting clicks on it. Tell us a little bit about how that happened. What was your involvement in that, and what do you think the involvement has been?
Yeah, it's been amazing, really. When you look at it, iRacing's been around for a long time, but I think it's just come into the public forum really because of the pandemic. And as a lot of businesses, you're relying on so many other people and so many other things. And this business is obviously very sponsorship driven. It's very OEM driven in terms of the manufacturers. And we have to stay relevant. Like every other business, you have to stay in front of people and be there. And as we looked at the drivers in particular, some of them, had done the iRacing and the simulators and so forth, but most of them not from a competitive level. Most of them, especially the ones that are maybe 30 years and older, they might use the OEM simulator and work on different things to prepare them for the race weekend, but a competitive type thing was more of a video game.
Yes.
And as everybody started talking about how do we stay current, how do we stay in front, the TV people got involved, and once that happened, it became, hey, yeah, we can stream these things, but why can't we televise them? And I think everybody improvised and adapt to be able to do that. You saw different cars at the front or different drivers at the front. But that really hasn't been our focus as far as who wins and whatever else. Obviously, the competition side of it always takes over to a certain degree. But being there and still being on the forefront of everybody's minds, it was unique in terms of our business and our sport, because a lot of other sports and a lot of other businesses really couldn't interact in the way racing could.
Well, and I think that's the beauty of what you guys figured out. And I was telling, several people this past week or so, that I've been talking to and coaching. It's interesting because, racing has always been innovation, from technology to everything about cars, everything about safety and health and safety. And we apply that to, street cars. And I think you guys are so innovative by thought already, because you're very engineer heavy. So there's a lot of brainiacs around you that sit around, probably have more ideas in a day than most of us have in a lifetime. You just have to implement them.
It's amazing, Terry, how it's evolved from the first weekend really being really the drivers. The drivers would enter the race. They would go do the race. I don't think anybody expected to have the viewership that they had initially. But then what happened was the competition side took over, and the spotters got involved, and the engineers got involved, and people like me got involved to the extent of trying to determine how much resource to really put into iRacing to differentiate between competition and participation.
Right.
And the participation was really what was important from our end. Where they finished and how they raced and that type of thing, how much resource you want to take away from the real world and put into the virtual world of competition is something that we've had to certainly balance.
Sure.
So, Tim, it's always said that businesses thrive on innovation and marketing. How did this whole idea start? What was the conversation like that said, hey, we need to put iRacing on television? Did anyone think it was going to work? Was there people who were 100% against it and people 100% for it? So how did all that happen? The culture must have been competitive, as you said, but what happened? What was the discussion like?
Well, I think we've all been aware of the iRacing side of life, and I think the drivers in particular, especially the younger ones, it's something that they've done and that they in some ways grew up doing. But as NASCAR looked at this, and iRacing obviously has a product, they're a business in itself, so they looked at it certainly as change as opportunity, and really it was a triangle between the teams, NASCAR and iRacing, to get that on board, and IndyCar and some of the other series had looked at doing it, but the television side of it, you obviously need the partner. They're obviously taking a risk. They obviously need to improvise with how do you do that, and to what level do you do that? Do you take it to where you're trying to mimic the real world, or are you trying to announce and look at this as a virtual world? And it was a bit of a balance, I think, in the very beginning to determine where that sweet spot is. And I think they've done a really good job of embracing that. Some of the drivers, and they really hadn't been exposed to iRacing. Some of them weren't really keen to do it until, again, they saw the interaction that they would have, even with regard to social media, which is a totally different experience. And, you've seen how it's evolved from the time it really all started a month or so ago to where it is today. And there's some balances there, and there's some different ways to looking at it, because you have to determine at the end of the day, what is your goal? Is your goal to bring all the superstars and names of racing into this race? Or is it to be relevant to the NASCAR fan and only the NASCAR Cup drivers? Where do you draw the line? And there's certain restrictions that everybody starts to find out between how many participants can you have, how entertaining can it be, how long can the cautions be, at what point in time do you actually determine that from a competition perspective, a caution should happen. And I think the different series have different perspectives on that.
Yeah, and people may not know that if they don't follow racing, but Tim, you said on the box, you're a strategist, and other racing, they call it a crew chief, so you're the guy that's calling the race, when to pit, when not to pit, what to do. You're the quarterback, so to speak, of just one of the 4 teams you guys have just in that one series. So it's interesting from your standpoint, because you're used to calling those races. I was watching one the other day, and I'm wondering, is Tim actually calling this race, or is he just out drinking tea and chilling? And is he involved?
Now, my focus is on the real world in terms of how to keep our business in place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't say that.
Like? Give us some insight. What is that like?
It's been very difficult. Yeah, there's been, just like everybody in the world, there's been compromise on all fronts. Every morning you wake up and you think you have one plan for the day, and you think you're going to work on one scenario, and by the afternoon it's completely different. It's completely changed, and you're trying to chase really what the government is saying, what the different health officials are saying, and how that all reacts relative to your business. And then with all the partners that we have across the board, it's so difficult to try and find that balance between all the different struggles that they have from a cash flow perspective, really a relevance perspective in some ways, and how we determine the way in which we give them value during these times. So it's been a constant negotiation on all fronts, really. And you have to put in perspective that we race cars at the end of the day.
What's the biggest obstacle?
This pandemic, we're not influencing it other than trying to help people I guess take their minds off of what's happening.
What's the biggest obstacle you're dealing with when you deal with it? You're saving most of your sponsors?
Really, our biggest obstacle is the same as others. It's really how you look after your best asset, and your number one asset, Roger says it all the time, is your human capital. And in what ways can we try and weather this storm to come out the other end as strong or stronger? And some of it, you have to look at these moving schedules, and you really don't know what your goals are each day. The schedule changes. This gets canceled, that gets canceled. We were sitting in St. Pete ready to race. And from the time we arrived on a Thursday to Thursday evening, it was going to become, maybe we're going to race with no fans, but we're going to race. And it evolved in a 12-hour period very quickly, no different than the NASCAR world. We had people on the way to Atlanta, and they literally landed, turned around and took off and came back home. It was a very dynamic situation and has been ever since. But our focus has really been on our people and how we can work together with our partners and our sponsors. And there's a lot of give and take in there. But then you also have the vendors and all the things that you're trying to do to ensure that we do our part to keep them in business, because we need them on the other side. So it's no different than any other business. It's cash flow and people.
I thought it was interesting because, I don't want to take you too far out of your orb of responsibility, but I think there's like 60,000 people or so, and a part of the Penske organization worldwide. There's a lot of other businesses that I'm sure you're aware of and you're a part of, but mainly the racing side. But talk a little bit about the culture of Penske organization worldwide, because this pandemic is global. It didn't just hit the United States, as we all know. So just interesting, how do you navigate that many people and keep people focused? I know Roger's a great captain, and that's his name, but just curious.
Well, I think Roger's strengths certainly shine, and he differentiates himself so much more in times like this. And I'm the racing guy. I'm not the day-to-day business guy. I sometimes refer to myself as his professional spender because my businesses really aren't profitable, whereas all the other ones typically are. But yeah, when you look at that many people and the responsibilities you have, and when you look at the fact that there's 60-some thousand employees, and then the knockdown effect to their families, and that obviously broadens when you look beyond just the employee. And again, you're trying to understand, we have the private sector being Penske Truck Leasing and Penske Truck Rental, which is an essential business relative to the transportation industry and all the different things that they're trying to be sure that they can get from A to B. Logistically, a lot of people don't realize that the yellow trucks that you see on the road are a very small portion of our business. And most of the ones that you see don't say Penske on them, the logistics business and what we do relative to moving raw materials and that type of stuff around the country. Then you have the public side of our business being PAG, or the car dealerships, and everybody understands how difficult it's been from that side. So yeah, you're constantly seeing, what's the balance between, furloughs, layoffs, and what can you actually do at this point in time, either from a government structure or really what you can accomplish on your own to sell cars during this time. So it's been a challenge on all fronts, and we're very fortunate to have more than just a racing team. But at the same time, we realize where we fall in that pecking order, that this at the end of the day isn't necessary, but it's something that's been the backbone and the common thread throughout all the Penske organizations. And we have just under 500 full-time employees here. And we also have a supercars team that races in Australia. So understanding the ways in which Australia are dealing with this, and our 40 some employees over there racing cars, but we also have business over there, which is obviously more important than what we do on the racetrack.
Sure. And I know Chet spent some time in Indianapolis. He's a TV radio guy his whole career. So he used to broadcast there. He knows David Letterman, he goes way back. Tim, went to high school in Indianapolis. I went to high school there. He went to college. So we're kind of indie guys. But it's interesting. I thought after the purchase of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and that whole brand, seemed like that was great for Penske to go in there and everybody's excited, and then the world stops. What did that feel like?
Yeah, I guess you look back at it and what's evolved from November to when this pandemic started or what have you. Roger has been so focused on ensuring that the month of May was a much better fan experience. And the irony of it, where our focus is in a different place right now. And sure. I think what you've seen though is IndyCar and the people that work within IndyCar have really taken a very, I guess, logical step in terms of how to approach things. They've been very definitive and very decisive about the fact that things need to be delayed. Hopefully August is a time in which we can revisit the Indianapolis 500. But he's been there every weekend, I think, since November. Focusing on the facility, focusing on, how to integrate all the Penske entities into IMS, but also how to build IndyCar. And it's been really good to watch from the outside. Obviously, being the team guy, I don't get involved in the competition side of IndyCar. But IMS is something that my dad used to work out of the old wooden garages there when I was a kid. He worked out of those garages from 1969 until they tore them down in, 1984, 85. So it's always been home to me. It's always been close, to him, obviously, ever since he went there with his father. So it's really been one of those things where if you wrote a script, it's hard to believe the fact that he owns the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it couldn't be in better hands. But at the same time, it's such a challenge, and I think everybody within the IndyCar industry has expressed, their gratitude for the approach that's being taken there. So hopefully we'll get back to normal at some point in time, but that normal is going to be a little different than maybe what we thought before.
Yep, absolutely.
After purchasing the Indianapolis 500, you brought up a good topic, the fan experience. Was there a plan to change the experience, to enhance it, to do a few things different?
Well, I think, Roger's a very practical guy. He says, where does everybody go when they're here? It's the restrooms, right? So you start there. He breaks it down to the very simple, and that's always been something that I've always admired is his ability with his complex business structure and all the challenges that he has day to day to drill right down to the simple side of it, deal with the simplicity and expand from there. And when things get really complicated, he breaks it down to the simple, and it's kind of like, where do you start? It's just, if we're going to start with the fan experience, let's start where I know everybody will go. And he's gone through there and he's physically gone into every single restroom on the place. And there's over 100 of them.
Right.
And he started there because he knew what the lead times would be. He's gone through, sat in the grandstands, looked at every different angle in which you can watch the race. He's looked at whether it's seating, whether it's how you view the monitors, what you can see from these different aspects. He's gone through all the different ticketing processes and the ways in which they reach
Wow.
the people. But he's continued to look at, how has it evolved, not only inside, but the traffic flow of the people and how they actually walk from a parking lot into it. And he wears everybody out at 80 some years old. He goes there, and from the beginning to the end, he's completely detailed with all those different things, whether it's the fencing, the lighting out front. When you pull up to 16th Street, you will notice that something's different. You will notice something's changed with regard to the entries, just the overall perception of what you see when you arrive. But he's also focused again on what is that experience during the race? What do these people see from their seats, whether it's the racetrack or the various monitors and the boards? He's gone to the extent of looking at Victory Lane. What is Victory Lane? Why can't the people in the grandstand see what's happening in Victory Lane? Let's figure out how to make that better. So I won't ruin it for him with a lot of things that people experience firsthand, but it's been full on.
Well,
Sounds
I think
like a visionary. Yeah.
that's one of the things about Roger. I think that anybody that knows him at any level, and Tim, obviously you know him very well. He's such an innovator himself, just in thinking. And like you said, at his age, he acts like he's 50 years old, running around and jumping off and just doing what he does. And my first interaction with Roger was 1992, I think it was. I met him through Emerson Fittipaldi at an autograph signing, and Emerson brought us into the pits with my sons, and I first met Roger, and it was like, you just shook hands with an icon. I was blown away growing up in India, and there's Roger Penske. And you were there somewhere. I'm not sure what you did in 1992, but it was in Detroit, actually. So, from day one, you just learned that there are people that are leaders, and you're a leader, Tim. I know you. I know what you do. I know I can see that around you. Roger's obviously a leader, and that just dispels over into everybody else.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I like you. I sat behind his pit as a kid. He was untouchable in my eyes.
Yes.
But what I always saw was he attracted the best people.
Yep.
I always felt like the people around him and the drivers all represented, he and that organization with professionalism. And I was always attracted to that and always wanted to be part of that. But I felt like he needed to earn that. It wasn't something that you were just going to send him a resume and achieve. And fortunately, it was something that as I look back at it, I still look at him as that same icon. I still have all that different respect. And I've said it many times. The unique thing about Roger and maybe my relationship with him is there's really three people there, and you have to be sure you don't get confused as to which one you're talking to. Because there's Mr. Penske, the billionaire icon. You sit in a board meeting with him and all the rest of it, and you give him that respect, and you keep your distance and do your part and speak when you're spoken to type thing. And then there's Roger Penske, my boss, and the interactions you have and the things in which you need to do and the way in which you do them as you would anybody else that you work for. And then there's RP. He's my friend, the person that you can really say anything to at the right moment and ask him anything about. And, RP has it's amazing. His sense of humor is beyond most people that you meet. But a lot of people don't get the chance to see that because they typically either see Mr. Penske or Roger. But you have to know exactly, when that is and understand really why you're there and what the task is there to achieve.
Yep. Before we wrap up, Tim, you got a beautiful family. I know Megan. She's a great support system to you. I know that. Absolutely. That's a great thing to have. And your two sons and Austin, I know he's racing in the Xfinity series, and I'm actually looking across outside of my computer. I got a poster of his in the Mustang that he, so he's a really nice young man and an honorable driver, and it really has become a great driver in his own right. So any last minute words about where Austin's going? Is he staying? Is he going to continue there?
Well, obviously they've only had a few races this year, and it's a really important year for him. It's his third year in the Xfinity series. And at that point in time, it's unfortunate the timing of all the rest of this because it really puts a bit of a pause in terms of the careers of the up and coming drivers because almost half of the year is gone to a certain degree. and they've got to catch up. But I had to get a chuckle. The first, when we talk about iRacing, in the first iRacing event, as they were looking at the criteria of who got to race in the NASCAR race and so forth, he entered that race, and he hadn't done iRacing, he said, since he was like 12 years old. He hadn't been back to iRacing. It was back when he drove a Legends car or whatever else. He hadn't even logged on. So he went to Best Buy, and he improvised a bit, and he's sitting in the curbside parking lot, and they ask him what he needs. He says, I've got to have a gaming computer, and I need to get this thing set up today so I can enter this race. Anyway, he came home that night, and the race didn't go so well, but he made the event, through the different qualifying races or whatever else. And he said, as much as I'm probably not as good as a lot of the iRacers because I haven't done it in so long, he says, I got to admit, when I logged on and I saw each driver joining the race, and there's Dale Earnhardt Jr. and Kyle Busch, and he's going through this list. He said, I got to tell you, Dad, it was really cool. I would have never thought, when I was 12, that I'd be sitting here on a video game with this caliber of drivers. So he has an appreciation for the sport, whether it's the virtual world or the real world. But he's I think on and off the track, I'm proud of what he does or whatever else. But he knows he has to earn it, and it's probably one of the toughest businesses to prove yourself, especially in his shoes.
He's a great young man. So you gave me a quote in my book, Performance Under Pressure, and you're a stand-up guy, man. I really
appreciate that, and certainly appreciate the time you spent with Austin.
Yeah, no question. Love being around him, and wish him all the best. Chet, any follow words before we finish up here?
Hey, before I leave, Tim, the show is called Influence Today, about who influenced you. And it sounds like Roger Penske did a great job of influencing you. And is there one thing that you can take away that really changed you or influenced you by his action, his leadership?
Well, it's so hard to say one thing. I've had some great mentors in my life, whether it was my father, the coaches I've had, through the athletics, some of the professors that I've had along the way. But really it comes down to people qualities. And I think the biggest asset that he has is his ability to attract like-minded people and put them in a situation where it's about us and rather than about me. And he says it all the time. He claims his father was the one that kind of instilled that in him. But if it's good for the team, it's going to be good for me. And at the end of the day, that's what he continues to preach. And I really feel like that the people that he surrounds himself with are really, he'll say it before anybody else, that's his biggest asset. And that appreciation for that, and really the integrity that he has. And for me, it's always that challenge to represent that in the right way. When I came to the organization, it's hard to believe it was over 20 years ago. I continued to ask myself, because I was 30 or 31 years old, it was like, what am I going to do to contribute to this, to this legacy? Where is it? Where can I make a difference? And that was my biggest hang up, honestly, when he asked me to come work for him, was getting him to answer that question, because I didn't really understand what it was. And he said, hey, you'll see when you get here and you'll figure it out. It was pretty simple. And
wow.
It's been an experience that I guess it's difficult to describe unless you've lived it. But he will always be kind of not only my mentor in a lot of ways, but I see what he does for so many other people that just completely goes unknown.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Tim, it's great to have you today. I know you're a busy guy. You got all kinds of things going on, but you've been on my mind. I wanted to get you on an interview, especially with this iRacing success and the viewership. And I was telling Chet's like, wow, it's amazing. Call the guy. Let's get him on, So I'm really glad you cut out some time for us, and wish you the best, and look forward to going racing again, that we can see you on a racetrack again and literally with people around you.
Yeah, I think we're on track to get started again in the real world here. Hopefully, if we can keep things going the right direction, hopefully sometime this month we'll see race cars back on the track again. And I think there's some pretty innovative ideas of how to do that. And when you look at racing again as a sport, it's very unique. You have one person sitting in a car. quite a few feet away from everybody else.
Exactly. Sometimes inches, but enough feet. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think there's enough social distancing there to make sure we, I guess, abide by the protocols relative to when the race starts. And our challenge is obviously how do we get to the point where the race starts?
Right. Exactly. Well, thank you for being here, Chet.
Thank you, Tim. I appreciate it. You've been listening to another Influence Today. If you like it, please hit like, and I would love to share. But before we leave, Tim, if somebody wants to contact you about information and about sponsorships, how do they do that?
Yeah, it's all right there on teampenske.com. So
teampenske.com.
Yeah.
To get in touch with Terry,
and obviously through social media, there can be some direct messages and that type of thing. So yeah, we're reachable.
Thank you, Terry.
TerryLyles.com, pretty simple. And Chet, they get you by
Chet at intentional-influence.com. Hey, thanks for another great session. I appreciate it, Tim, as our guest. A lot of good insights from Influence Today.